Today is July 30th, 1986. This is Joe Todd, and interview with Mr. Henry James in Chandler, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born? Where were you born?
I was born just outside of Oklahoma City, which Oklahoma City is included now.
When's your birthday?
December the 19th, 1897.
Who is your father?
George James.
And your mother?
Rosie James.
What was her maiden name?
Rosie Evans James.
Where were your parents from?
Mississippi and part from Tennessee.
Did you know your grandparents?
Oh, yes. That is, oh, yes. My grandmother and grandfather.
Or what were their names?
Her grandmother's name was Emily Evans. But second husband was a Hogg, A.J. Hogg. He was just a step-grandfather.
I was going to ask you if you had heard any stories about the slave days.
Well, yes.
What have you heard about those days?
Well, to begin with, my grandmother. My grandmother was about three-quarter Indian. And the Indian people gave her to some white people, plantation owners, by the name of Evans. Wait a minute. Adams was the first people that she was given to. When she was just a little girl. She didn't know anything about her real mother and father. She was given to them because they wanted her so bad. But they raised her until she was grown, and after 65.
James, are you going with us?
She remained with Miss Evans until she married this man home.
Where was this?
That was in it's around Jackson, Mississippi.
Did she tell you anything else about being a slave in the slave days, things that happened?
Well, they accepted her. These white people accepted her, and they raised her up in the home. She never worked in the field. She always worked in the home, as people call it, and taking care of their children. She never was out in the field like so many of them were, and she never was whipped, so she said. She was awful nice about obeying, and they just take her as a quarter with them. And I suppose that was due to the fact that she was just about a full-blooded Indian. But she did have an Negro blood. That's the way that she tells me.
Did she talk about when Lincoln freed the slaves?
No, I've never heard her say anything about Lincoln or they were always spoke so well of Lincoln due to the fact that they felt that Lincoln, after all, had a great deal to do with freeing the slaves. But historically speaking, Lincoln was not his intention as a president to free the slaves. That was not his intention. Because of the fact that when they were into battle, according to history, and it was fighting, and the North was losing to the South, they said, well, now we've got to do something about this. So they accepted Negroes in the army. And when they did that, they began to gain ground. Consequently, the northern people finally subdued the southern people. But as an aftermath of this whole thing, well, the northern people, they didn't believe in slavery anyway. And, but it all happened under Abraham Lincoln. But it was not his intention from the beginning that to free the slaves, to fight to free the slaves. It was the fighting to bring the South and the North in unison together, just as we are now, instead of being divided. So I know that's true. I have history on that.
When did your family move to Oklahoma?
1889.
They come in for the land run?
Yes.
Did your grandfather make the land run?
Step-grandfather is my father, and my father.
Did they talk about making the run, the day of the run?
Well, I've heard them talk about it. The run began out of Guthrie. And of course, they were in Oklahoma City. They had to make their way up to Guthrie in order to get in on this run. And they wasn't successful in the 1889 run. Therefore, they went back to Oklahoma City and done the best they could until the second run, which was in 1891. And then that's where my grandfather succeeded in staking a claim 2 miles north, 1 east, 3/4 north of Luther, Oklahoma. My father wasn't successful. However, due to the fact that my father was quite a musician back in those days, a banjo maker and so forth and so on, and he would always could make a little money in spite of the hard times and condition. People made merry back in those days, got together, and they'd have a dance or this or that or the other, and they would pay him so much for that reason. He could always make a little money when nobody else couldn't. And he also was a great hand, wood hand. He could make shingles, he could hew logs, he could put them together, and he knew how to make, they didn't have any cement, how to clay, straw, and things like that put together to make water in order to chip the hole between the logs. very good at that. For that reason, my grandfather, step-grandfather, persuaded him to help him settle up his claim. And if he would do that, he would give it so many acres. But he did. But my grandfather didn't stay with his promise. Therefore, it threw a conflict in the family. My father then went down here around I cared for 3 kids and a boy then, and thinking that he might be able to stake a claim, or put in a claim for 3 children, for him, right, really. Because my mother was just about a half of it. But he wasn't successful in so doing. Consequently, they moved back up there to home place, we called it, in 1900. And that caused a separation between my father and my mother. Because my father didn't want to get into real serious trouble, and that's what it was leading to. Therefore, he left. Well, after his leaving, we stayed there on the farm for a while, and then I had a brother at that time of about 15 or 16 years of age, and he was quite a little fellow. So he moved us out from that place. And we got along pretty good until...
Now, your mother and grandmother, would they be Choctaw freedmen?
yes, they were Choctaw.
Okay, now, are you considered a Choctaw freedman?
Yeah.
Did your mother or you or your brothers and sisters have any rights with the tribe?
Well, never could establish.
Okay. Are you on the Choctaw roll?
No.
No. You were never enrolled?
Never really.
Okay.
That is due to the fact that we just didn't have the proof of my grandmother. We have to start with my grandmother. I had to start there. So, but she didn't know anything about my parents.
Did your grandmother ever talk about coming to Indian Territory?
Well, I'm sure they did because they came out here.
Did they come over the Trail of Tears?
No, they came by train.
By train.
But my mother and my dad came by wagon train. After they had raised the money for boxcars, well, the guy that was headed that ran away with the money. So they had to leave the best of the round. So they went around dumping up. I think they said it was a 45 wagon, horse, mule, and ox. That's not a guide before they got here.
Did they talk about the wagon trip to Oklahoma?
Oh, yeah, she talked about my mother. Talked about the wagon trip to Oklahoma. What a hard time that they had. Part of the time they didn't have much to go home. But where they camped, there's a lot of huge trees as well. And they would gather acorns and parts of them, much of the others. And the men kill rabbits or birds or squirrel or whatnot. And They didn't starve. They finally made it without starvation. But they said they had it hard.
When did your family move over here to where you were born?
They moved at 8, like on 1897, 89, 91, 91. They moved on that farm, and as soon as they stated 91, 1891, immediately after the state that they moved the family, cut out some trees, and they cut the trees down and got the limbs put on the top and things of that kind, and they were hauled off and dug what we call a dugout, so they could go in on rain. But they cooked, and if it wasn't raining, they'd sleep out under the shed, because they'd have it all boxed in around with limbs and so forth.
How big was that dugout?
Oh, I imagine it was about 60 by 20, something like that. It was large because of the large family.
Were you born in that dugout?
No, I was born in a dugout this side of Oklahoma City, though.
About the same size? Same?
Well, I don't know what size that was. I don't know.
How long did the family live in that dugout?
Well, we lived in the dugout at Oklahoma City until this claim was staked by my grandfather, and they dug the dugout and put up this huge shed. And then they moved us all on there.
And what kind of work did your father do?
Oh, my father, well, he was a woodman. He could do most anything he wanted to do with wood. Make shingles and make, that's one thing. Then he was, both he and my step-grandfather were good blacksmiths, too. He was good blacksmiths.
Did they do any farming?
Oh, yes, that's certainly farming.
As a small boy, what chores did you do in the farm?
Well, at the time that when I was at least 3 or 4 years of age, started out, my chore was to get in wood, chip. We all had, everybody had a chore to do. Like it is now. Just as soon as you were 3 or 4 years of age, they would give you something to do every day. That's the way I was brought up. But of course, after I got larger, say 6, 7 years of age, I could go out and get the cotton a little bit, and go get a bucket of water and the spray for the hedge. And by the time I was 8 or 9, I had a cow to milk, chickens to feed, just one thing or another, which we had to do our farm.
How many acres could you plow in one day?
Now, I never did do any plowing. I never did do any plowing.
Would you tell me about chopping cotton? How do you chop cotton?
Well, that's what I don't know. I think that I do know. Well, here's the cotton roll. You started thick. And when it comes up, and the grass comes up with it, you start to chopping this cotton, chopping this road. Well, you leave it at a stand, one or two stalks, about every 12 or 14 inches apart. And that was one thing that I could really do, that was chop cotton. I never could pick it, chop cotton.
How much could you pick in one day?
Well, I have picked as high as 300. But I have chopped as much as 2.25 acres of cotton a day.
Where was the cotton gin?
This one,
Where was the cotton gin located?
well, the cotton gin located, two in Worcester, two in Wellston, one in after Fallis came in overseas. Of course, this was 1903. There was two cotton gins at Fallis where the Katy Railroad went through. Katy Railroad was built from Oklahoma City to Kansas in 1902. But this school was built in 1897, I think, something like that. This railroad goes through.
Did you do any work for the railroad?
Not at that time, no. I have worked some for, it was the Frisco at that time, that I worked for.
Did you ever hear any stories about the tornado of '97?
Yeah, I have.
What did you hear about that story? What
Well,
happened?
there's the white lady that I used to do all of her decorating by the name of Fanny Filch. They made the run in 1889 at Guthrie, Oklahoma. And her father was at the harness, buggy, and wagon, implement, they call it, business at Guthrie. And by the way, there's two large big buildings there, the main town of Guthrie, still standing that they built, the Filch building. And when they opened up in 91 down here, they came down here to Chandler and set up an implement store here in Chandler. All right? In 1897, when that tornado hit, she said, in other words, they were living, you know where the First National Drive-In Bank is? That whole 4 lots, I think that's where they live. And where the Redbud is now, there was 2 dwelling houses. Tornado hit one of those houses, and triple 45, and they brought it over to her house, and they died. Over to her mother's house, and they died. Now, they were carrying people at that time that was hurt, wounded, and so forth, to the Presbyterian Church. That's on the state, right east to west of the courthouse, that old Presbyterian Church. And that's where they carried many of them. The doctors come right on. Now, a fellow that's I'm married in this family. The story that they tell, they were living down under the hill from the city hall. The story is this, that they declare true, that Lord Hail dipped down and picked up his son, drew him upon the hillside, and lodged him in a tree, and he didn't get a scratch. And in the meanwhile, down here in the same spot, they had a nephew who got tuberculosis. And they had him out of the house to himself because tuberculosis was a dreaded disease back in those days. And it blew everything from around this man. It just left him there on the carpet. Now then, another friend of mine that was here in this tornado, he and I worked together at the ice plant for a lot of years. He told me by the time he left, waterworks used to be down there where the meat processing plant is now. And he was the pump. We had shallow wells all over back of the old ice house. And they rushed uptown, and on the east side, about where the Keys real estate building is, just south of that. Well, it was an old wood shack house, and they blew in and trapped this man, and it caught a fire. And the man begged him to cut his leg off, cut his leg off, so he could get it out, and nobody had nerve enough to cut his leg off. So he was burned. Now these, what I'm saying, now these are supposed to be true stories. Of course, I want to hear. But and Fatty Phillips declared that those three people died, right? Showed me the room that they died.
How many were killed in that tornado?
I can't recall. I don't remember.
Do you remember Statehood Day? Tell me about that day.
Well, the day of the celebration, statehood, was a pretty big day. One of the reasons why I said it was a pretty big day because in this same melee, they voted out whiskey. And of course the people all had saloons and things of that kind. But they gave them so many days to get rid of their wind. And of course, up until those days, statehood was statehood. They had a jolly time. I'm talking about for the most part. The drunks, the hollering, the yelling, but no fights. I can't recall a fight.
How many saloons were in Chandler?
Well, I wasn't in Chandler at that time.
Oh,
I was
okay.
at Luther.
Oh, how many saloons were at Luther?
We had just one at Luther. But I was told we had 5 saloons in Chandler at one time. And no, neither one of those did. Thorpe. Well, they were Thorpe. They're right back of the old Ford garage. Right back of Sally Farrell lived paper. That White House. His grandfather had a saloon on the corner where the old Ford garage. And there was 4 other saloons, I was told.
How big was Luther in those days?
I think started.
How big was Luther in those days?
Oh, that's only about 300 population, 250 or 300. But it was thickly settled. the rural, heavy settlement.
When did you move to Chandler?
We actually moved to Chandler. My folks did in 1911. However, I had a brother that moved in Chandler area in 1995. And of course, we'd be back at the point. But my folks didn't move to Chandler until 1911. Well, when they moved to Chandler, I was away at school. I had an uncle that was a bookkeeper for the Cunningham people at Sioux City Highway. And they sent me to come up there and stay with him to go to school. So when school was out, and they were transferring my uncle from Sioux City to Chicago. So he didn't know what the setup was going to be. So they sent me home. Well, when I came home, my uncle lived right out there in Channel. So actually, I was home now.
How big was Chandler in those days?
About, I'd say 1,800. Something like that.
Tell me about, did you join the Army or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
When?
I was drafted in August of 1980.
Where'd you go for your basic training?
Camp Dunstan, Kansas.
Tell me about your basic.
Well, it was very good. Strenuous, however. Going into something that you didn't know too much about. But as I could look back through it, it had some good points, bad points. And what I did, I just made up my mind, well, now here I am. I'll make the best of it possible. That's the way I felt about it. And that's what I did.
How long did you stay at Camp Dunstan?
I was in Fred 9 months. But that is due to the fact when the armistice was signed in November 11th, and the boys that was just shipped in drafted, they were immediately sent back home, except a few of us. Well, they kept me for the purpose of taking over what we call a discharging bill station. I was over it. For that reason, I didn't get a chance to come along until May. And for the purpose of discharging soldiers from other camp from overseas. And especially the 92nd and the 93rd Division, which was one of the most outstanding group of soldiers that they had. Him and the Rainbow Division, which was like just the 92nd Division came through and 93rd.
Did you ever go overseas?
No, I did not.
I'll be right back.
Emptied our bag of hay that was left on. Didn't have anything but our pipe, gun, 45, and knife. However, when that had taken place, and they found out that we were going to have to leave in about 2 or 3 days, they were short in the band of cornetists. They needed another cornet player. And of course, when I was inducted in service, when they was given this award, as to what we could do, how much schooling we had, so forth and so on. And of course, I made it clear that yes, I played music, and I did typing, and that's my thing. But for that reason, they sent down to my company and had me transferred to my company, H, to the band. So I was with the band when we made it to the school.
Did you have black officers or white officers?
Part white, part of the time white, part black. Now, when we first went in our officers were all white. And what happened, they had a training cadet down at Camp Pike, Arkansas. And some of the boys, very few, of the first draftees, which was in September, October 1970. They went down, and finally they made second level. And they came, sent them in, then they sent down here Fort Ward Chuka. That's in Arizona. And got a group of those officers out of the 24th and 25th Infantry and sent them up there to take off.
Did you ever hear about the big race riot in Houston?
Yes.
What's caused that, do you know?
Well, actually, I never got the real, what you say real about it. It was a flare-up, a racial condition, that's what it was, which was happening constantly. But for the most part, we didn't have as much trouble along those lines as one would think, due to the fact of the feelings that existed between the two races. Take care, we were divided. We had Camp Klux, but we never had any running anyway.
What'd you do on Armistice Day, the day the war ended?
I wasn't aware of it until that night.
Then what happened?
It was about 2 o'clock that morning, because we were ready to board the train to go to Hoboken, New Jersey, to go overseas. But we didn't know why they were holding us like that until about 2 o'clock the next morning.
Then what happened?
Oh, well, we had a jubilee time. We sure did. Our band was playing and it was just cutting up some. And our superiors, they just let us have it, as long as it wasn't out there like it.
Would you tell me about some of your more memorable events in your Army career that you remember?
Well, I could say this. I went down with influenza for a few days. And I'll always remember there's a white buddy nearby, and I just rushed, was on an ambulance, rushed me to the base hospital over in Raleigh. And there I lay for several hours unconscious. And I just knew I wouldn't be able to survive. But finally they brought me out. And I got along all right.
What medicines were they using to fight the flu?
The first thing they said they gave me, I didn't know. The first thing that they gave was about 3 or 4 ounces of whiskey and lemon. That was the first thing they took. Maybe it was quinine in it. That's what the first thing that they would give me.
Then what would they give you?
Well, the juices and light food, but they always use a lot of liver. Where I was only in there about 4 days, and I told them, let me get out and go back to my lunch. And I was weak, but they finally let me out.
How many soldiers died of the flu?
I don't got the information as to how many died, but I do know this. I've seen them standing up beside the barracks, and all at once it just all over dead. And they had so many dead out there at the morgue that they couldn't let bomb them fast enough, so they had to just put them on ice. Now, I see that with my own eyes because I had to carry the payroll over to Fort Riley for those that was in the hospital to sign the payroll. Now, that's actually true.
What did you do after you left the Army?
I came back to Chandler. I was working for a lady that owned the Chandler Ice Company. And the last thing she said to me the day that I was leaving, she wished me good luck and have a return, and if you return, you'll have a job. So when I returned, and May, that's when she needed someone in May to start the ice mine. So I drove the ice mine, delivered ice all over town for a couple of years.
What size ice blocks? What size blocks of ice did you
Well,
deliver?
300 pounds now. Of course, we cut them into 25, 50, 75, 100. But the butchers would take 300 pounds too.
And what were you delivering the ice in? What did you have? What were you using to deliver the ice with?
Oh, wagon, a hard-bound team.
On the farm, do you remember what brand of wagons you had?
Oh, no, I don't remember what brand they had. I didn't just have a wagon. My folks did, but I
When you moved to Chandler, had the town pretty well rebuilt from the tornado when you moved here?
well, yes, it was built. Yeah, it was good. Yes,
Was there ever a strong KKK in Lincoln County?
that's true, yes.
You have any trouble with them?
Well, I had several letters from you.
What'd they say?
Well, they told me to be careful and watch my mouth, else would be tarred and feathered.
They ever stopped you in the streets or anything, or? And would you, in your own words, explain your feelings on the Jim Crow law?
Well, Jim Crow law, it wasn't all, we I could look see it to understand, it wasn't all bad. And especially back in those days, due to the fact that we've been used to just being with my people, you be with your people. So, looking at it from that point of view, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, only when it comes to this point. And I made this statement when I was in service. Our people wasn't qualified to hand down to us from an educational point of view that the white man was able to hand down to his. Looking at it from that point of view, I thought it was very wrong. I thought it should be equalized because of the fact that in the event of a war, just like we did in World War I, we were denied machine gun battalion. No Negroes. Even the 92nd Division didn't have a machine gun battalion.
Why?
Because they wouldn't let them have it. But what they did was they put that group of soldiers marching battle right behind this group of soldiers, the machine gun battalion, behind them, backing them up. And behind the machine gun battalion, there was heavy and light artillery bubbling ahead in order that they could take it in terms that they could run the enemy back so the marchers on foot wouldn't have as much danger of being all slaughtered and killed. They did that. But we didn't have anyone work with a heavy light artillery either, not an equal.
Are there any effects of the Jim Crow law today?
Well, I would say yes, because that kind of a law, it'll take years and years and years for that to come to an end. However, as I could see it today, it has gone a long ways of living away.
How has the attitude of the whites toward the blacks changed from your childhood to today?
Well, you speak it as a whole, because number one, the neighborhood where we live, usually, the white people and the black people around that area, well, got along just like we get along now. And we had several run-ins, the whites and the blacks. And of course, it's so happy. The white people in our area, they take up for us as quick as they would for anybody else. So maybe get such errors it didn't bother me too much until we moved down here in Lincoln County. And it was just pretty bad. Lincoln County, Chandler, Lincoln County, always have been on the other side, pretty much. However now, don't misunderstand me to say that they were not good people. Because there's always been a lot of good people in Chandler. And some, well, it's just all the Negroes in Chandler weren't good either. That is good.
How did the Depression affect you and your family in the 1930s?
Well, it was pretty bad due to the fact that I lost my children's mother. I had 4 children. We had 4 children. Well, I lost their mother when, well, at 32. I was right in the Depression was awful bad. And after putting her away, it was just my children and I never separated from them, kept them together. I schooled them about college degrees and things like that. But it wasn't easy. However, I've always had this one thing in mind: if anybody can get into work or get something to do, I can. And I did.
What type of work were you doing in the...
Just first one thing at that time.
What
Because I had to quit teaching school in 29 due to the fact of the ill health of my wife.
So you were teaching school?
And
Where did you go for your teacher's training?
I did teacher's training. I went to school,
Mm-hmm.
and they no college, not whatever. Tell you what happened. But I came from Iowa to Chandler. It's a few days before school closed out here in the country. And I went over to the teacher, I didn't know her, and explained this to her that I was 8th grader, but I didn't bring my grades with me, and I didn't have time to sit back for them. Would she let me take the examination? Of course, she wanted up. Of course, I could see her side of it. So there I was. I didn't have an 8th grade certificate. I didn't have a high school diploma. I had no college. But yet, what I did, I was closely connected with some white people here in Chandler. The name of Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Gilstrap. Well, Miss Gilstrap, her husband was a major. Major Gilstrap.
That's Harry Gilstrap.
Well, so in working for them out in the yard, they said, well, they said, did you go to school? We had a principal here by the name of Mrs. Sauter. Did you go to school with Mrs. Sauter? I said, no. Said, well,
You're talking about Mrs. Adams, and then you worked for the Gilstraps?
yes. Well, in working for them on the yard, the detective and I used pretty nice grammar, things of that kind. And I told him that I wanted my folks lived so far in the country I couldn't walk to high school here, but I would like very much to get over this book, high school book. So they furnished me with books, give me lesson assignments. I had to bring them in every so often. And they'd go over, examine, and on until, it was pretty good. Well, but I take the notion that I'd go around different towns trying to get a good job, make enough money to go to Langston. Well, I never did, wasn't successful. And but I didn't give it up. I've always studied. And I could get help from different people. I wasn't ashamed to go to people that I knew that could help me. And on like that. So it takes time here in the county that the county superintendent said to this Mrs. Gray, which Mrs. Gray was formerly a school teacher herself, said she's got to find somebody black fellow to go out and finish a term. Said the bad guy's teaching out there, his wife is a little sick, and she's teaching, and he has to go and take over her school. I'll have to send somebody out there to finish. That was an 8-week term. And Mrs. Gray said to her, so, well, you don't have to go to fellow. I know someone you get. And she said, told him who I was. Called the county superintendent, didn't know me. But she told him, said, well, now her brother was a doctor. Dr. J.W. Allen. He was my family doctor. And she said, you called out. He knows him because Henry uses him as his family doctor. So she did. And Doc told us that anybody could find what he can. So she said, well, you go and tell him to come up to my office in the morning. So he drove down to my house that night. We were sitting there playing a game of pitch. And knocked on the door, just come in. I looked up and Dr. Adams. I said, well, what's up, Doc? He said, I want to talk to you. We walked down to his car, we got in, and he explained it to me. He said, you think you want to accept it? I said, well, sure, I'll accept it. So that's the way I got started. And when after this 8th week, school was out, the people in that district, to the county superintendent, wanted her to send me back. Well, she told me I can't send him back without a certificate. But she said, oh, wait. Says, if he wants to take the examination for a third-grade certificate, if he can make it, I can send him back. If he can't, I can't send him. So she challenged me with that. So I accepted the challenge. I went on to take the examination. That's the way I got started. And when I wound up, of course, I wound up with state certificate and 30 college hours. And 30 college hours to show. I have state certificate, I have a first grade certificate, second grade, and a third grade. I have all my certificates.
And you did that all by yourself?
No, not alone.
Yeah.
By help. I had to.
But you did it on your own?
On my own, that's right.
Did you know Harry Gilstrap?
Oh, yes.
What kind of man was he?
Oh, to me, Harry was a gentleman. He was just a straight-out gentleman. However, due to the fact of his lady, he was firm to what he had to say, or what the but as a gentleman, he was and his wife she was a darling. And one of the boys were living. One of these boys were living. Klan boy somewhere. I think so. I think that's what Mrs. Farrell told me. One of them living. Yes, he was a fine man.
What did you do during World War II?
Beg your pardon?
What did you do during World War II?
I was janitor in Helmet Department Store when the war was declared. I stayed with them due to the fact I had a girl in college and a girl in high school, and until the girl finished college. And August the 15th of 43, I went over and worked at Tinker Abbey's. I worked there 12 months, a little better, and I got on leave and went to Portland, Oregon, and I think Portland, Oregon, up in 46.
What'd you do in Portland?
Worked at shipyard.
Shipyard?
Painter.
No, what were your duties at Tinker? What'd you do there?
I was packer. They box pack everything. They crates, pack, shoot flies, all different parts of the outfit.
What was Tinker's main use during the war? What was being done at Tinker mainly?
So
What was being done at Tinker during the war mainly? Was it an aircraft maintenance or what?
well, yes, for the most part, it was aircraft maintenance, and it was the headquarters. They ship parts of the airplane all over, and all overseas. And, plane mechanics, need tips, need this and that and the other. Well, they get them out of Tinker Air Base. We had to clean them and use a certain paper around it to protect the salt from flying them over the salty water. We had to protect them. So it was a busy place.
And what type of ships were they building in Portland?
They catered to this particular shipyard that I worked, mostly to PCs, as Pacific Patrol, small ones. But they were very fast.
What shipyards were you working in?
Commercial iron.
Well, anything else about the early days you want to talk about? Well, Mr. James, I think we have a good interview. I've enjoyed this very much.
Done my best, the best. Always I could talk from here tonight about various things in my life, but that isn't necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did she tell you anything else about being a slave in the slave days? Things that happened?
Well, they accepted her. These white people accepted her, and they raised her up in the home. She never worked in the field. She always worked in the home, these people's home, and taking care of their children. She never was out in the field like so many of them were. and she never was whipped, so she said. She was awful nice about obeying, and they just take her as just one of her family. And I suppose that was due to the fact that she was just about a full-blooded Indian. But she did have a little Negro blood. And that's the way she tells it.
Did she talk about when Lincoln freed the slaves?
No, I've never heard her say anything about Lincoln or they were always spoke so well of Lincoln due to the fact that they felt that Lincoln, after all, had a great deal to do with freeing the slaves. But historically speaking, Lincoln, it was not his intention as a president to free the slaves. That was not his intention. Because of the fact that when he went into battle, according to history, and there was fighting, and the North was losing to the South, and they said, well, now we've got to do something about this. So they accepted Negroes in the army. And when they did that, they began to gain ground. Consequently, the northern people finally subdued the southern people. But as an aftermath of this whole thing, well, the northern people, they didn't believe in slavery anyway, and but it all happened under Abraham Lincoln. But it was not his intention from the beginning that to free the slaves, to fight to free the slaves, and to fight to bring the South and the North in unison together, just as we are now, instead of being divided. So I know that's true. I have some history on that.
When did your family move to Oklahoma?
1889.
They come in for the land run?
Yes.
Okay. Did your grandfather make the land run?
Step-grandfather and my father.
Did they talk about making the run the day of the run?
Well, I've heard them talk about it. And the run began out of Guthrie. And of course, they were in Oklahoma City. They had to make their way up to Guthrie in order to get in on this run. And they wasn't successful in the 1889 run. Therefore, they went back to Oklahoma City and done the best they could until the second run, which was in 1891. And then there's where my grandfather succeeded in staking a claim 2 miles north, 1 east, 3/4 north of Luther, Oklahoma. My father wasn't successful. However, due to the fact that my father was quite a musician from back in those days, a banjo picker and so forth and so on, and he would always could make a little money in spite of the hard times and condition. People made merry back in those days, got together, and they'd have a dance or this or that or the other, and they would pay him so much for that reason. He could always make a little money when nobody else could. And he also was a great wood hand. He could make shingles, he could hew logs, he could put them together. and he knew how to make, they didn't have any cement, how to get clay, straw, and things like that put together to make water in order to shake the hole between the logs. He was very good at that. For that reason, my grandfather, step-grandfather, persuaded him to help him settle up his claims. And if he would do that, he would give him so many acres. But he did. But my grandfather did stay with his promise. Therefore, it threw a conflict in the family. My father then went down here around I had 3 kids when I was born then, and thinking that he might have been able to stake a claim, or put in a claim for we children, or have right, really. Because my mother was just about a half Indian, but he wasn't successful in so doing. Consequently, they moved back up there at the home place, we called it, in 1900. And that caused a separation between my father and my mother. Because my father didn't want to get into no serious trouble, and that's what it was leading. Therefore, he left. Well, after his leaving, we stayed there on the farm for a while, and then I had a brother at that time of about 15 or 16 years of age, and he was quite a little fellow, so he moved us out from that place, and we got along pretty good until
Now, your mother and grandmother, would they be Choctaw freedmen?
yes, they were Choctaw.
Okay, now, are you considered a Choctaw freedman?
Yeah.
Okay. Did your mother or you or your brothers and sisters have any rights with the tribe?
Well, never could establish it.
Okay. Are you on the Choctaw rolls?
No.
No. You were never enrolled?
Never really.
Okay.
That is due to the fact that we just didn't have a proof of my grandmother. It had to start with my grandmother. It had to start there. So, but she didn't know anything about my parents.
Did your grandmother ever talk about coming to Indian Territory?
Well, I'm sure they did because they came out here.
Did they come over the Trail of Tears?
No, they came by train.
By train.
But my mother and my dad came by wagon train. After they had raised the money for boxcars, well, the guy that was handicapped ran away with the money. So they had to leave the best they knew how. So they went around getting up. I think they said it was a 40-45 wagon, horse, mule, and ox. Because I don't die before they got here.
Did they talk about the wagon trip to Oklahoma?
Oh, yes, she talked about my mother. Talked about the wagon trip to Oklahoma. What a hard time that they had. Was the time they didn't have much to go home. That's where they'd camp. If there's a lot of huge trees as well, and they would get acorns and parts of them, and just one thing or another, and the man could kill rabbits or just coal or whatnot. And they didn't starve. They probably made it without starvation. But they said they had it hard.
When did your family move over here to where you were born?
They moved at 8, I bought 1897, 89, 91, 91. They moved on that farm, and as soon as they staked it, 1891. Immediately after the stake, they moved the family, cut out some trees, and cut the trees down and got the limbs put on the top and things of that kind, and they just hauled off and dug what we call a dugout, so they could go in on the rain. But they cook, but if it wasn't raining, they'd sleep out over their shed, because they had it all boxed in around with limbs and so forth and so on.
How big was that dugout?
Oh, I imagine it was about a 16 by 20, something like that. It was large because of the large family.
Yeah. Were you born in that dugout?
No, I was born in a dugout this side of Oklahoma City, though.
About the same size? Same?
Well, I don't know what size that was. I don't remember.
How long did the family live in that dugout?
Well, we lived in the dugout at Oklahoma City until this claim was staked by my grandfather, and they dug the dugout and put up this huge shed. And then they moved us all over there.
And what kind of work did your father do?
Oh, my father, well, he was a woodman. He could do most anything he wanted to do with wood. Make shingles, that's what they did. Then he was, he and my step-grandfather was good blacksmiths, too. Good blacksmiths, pardon.
Did they do any farming?
Oh, yes, certainly. Farming.
As a small boy, what chores did you do in the farm?
Well, at the time that I was at least 3 or 4 years of age, started out, my chores was to get in wood, chip. Everybody had a chore to do. Not like it is now. Just as soon as you were 3 or 4 years of age, they would give you something to do every day. That's the way I was brought up. And of course, after I got larger, say 6, 7 years of age, I could go out and have to pick cotton for a little bit, and go get a bucket of water from the spray for the heads. And by the time I was 8 or 9, I had a cow to milk, chickens to feed, just one thing or another. We have to do our farm.
How many acres could you plow in one day?
I never did do any plowing.
Okay.
I never did do any plowing.
Would you tell me about chopping cotton? How do you chop cotton?
Well, that's the way I don't know. I think that I do know. Well, here's the cotton row. It's planted thick. But when it comes up, and the grass comes up with it, you start to chopping this roll. Well, you leave it at a stand 1 or 2 stalks about every 12 or 14 inches apart. And that was one thing that I could really do, that was chop cotton. I never could pick it, chop cotton.
How much could you pick in one day?
Well, I have picked as high as 300, but I have chopped as much as 2.25 acres of cotton a day.
Where was the cotton gin? Where was the cotton gin located?
Well, the cotton gin is located, 2 in Luther, 2 in Wellston, 1 in after Fallis came on the scene. Of course, this was 1903. There was 2 cotton gins in Fallis, Oklahoma, when the Katy Railroad was. Katy Railroad was built from Oklahoma City to Kansas in 1903. The first go was built in 1997, I think, something like that. This railroad goes in.
Did you do any work for the railroad?
Not at that time, no. I have worked some for it was a Frisco at that time. Yeah, I worked for it.
Did you ever hear any stories about the tornado of '97? What did you hear about that storm? What happened?
Well, there's a white lady that I used to do all of her decorating by the name of Fanny Filch. They made the run in 1889 at Guthrie, Oklahoma. And her father was in the harness, buggy, wagon, implement, they call it, business at Guthrie. And by the way, there's 2 large brick buildings there, the main town of Guthrie, still standing that they built, the Phillips building. And when they opened up in 91 down here, they came down here to Chandler and set up an implement store here in Chandler. All right. In 1897, when that tornado hit, she said, in other words, they were living, you know where the First National Drive-In Bank is? That hole, 4 watts, I think that's where they live. And where the Red Bud is now, there was 2 dwelling houses. The tornado hit one of those houses and crippled 4 or 5. And they brought them over to her house and they died over to her mother's house and they died there. Now, they were carrying people at that time that was hurt, wounded, and so forth, to the Presbyterian Church. That's on East 8th, right east and west of the courthouse, an old Presbyterian Church. And that's where they carried many of them. So the doctors can wait on them. Now, a fellow that I married into this family. The story that they tell, they were living down under the hill from the city hall. The story is this, they declare it's true, that tornado dipped down and picked up his son, threw him upon the hillside, and lodged him in a tree, and he didn't get a scratch. And in the meanwhile, down here in the same spot, they had a nephew that tuberculosis, that they had him out of the house to himself because tuberculosis was a dreaded disease back in those days. And it blew everything from around us bad. It just left me out of the car. Now then, another friend of mine that was here in this tornado, he and I worked together at the ice plant for a lot of years. He told me about the time he left waterwork used to be down there where the meat processing plant is now. And he was the puppet. We had shallow wells all over the back of the old ice house. And they rushed uptown, and on the east side, about where the Keys real estate building is, just south of that, well, it was an old wood shack house, and it blew in, it trapped this man, and it caught a fire. And the man begging him to cut his leg off, cut his leg off, so to get it out, and nobody had nerve enough to cut his leg off. So he just broke. Now what I'm saying, now these are supposed to be true stories. Of course, I wasn't here. But in fact, it was declared that those 3 people died. That showed me the room that they died.
How many were killed in that tornado?
I can't recall.
Do you remember Statehood Day? Tell me about that day.
Well, the day of the celebration of statehood was a pretty big day. One of the reasons why I said it's a pretty big day because in this same melee, they poured out whiskey. And of course the people all had saloons and things of that kind. But they gave them so many days to get rid of their wind. And of course, up until those days, statehood was statehood. They had a jolly time. I'm talking about for the most part. The drunks, the hollering, and the yelling, and the going, but no fights. I can't recall a fight.
How many saloons were in Chandler?
Well, I wasn't in Chandler at that time.
Oh,
I was
okay.
at Luther.
Oh, how many saloons were in Luther?
We had just one at Luther. But I was told we had 5 saloons in Chandler at one time. And no, neither one of those did. Thorpe. Some of them was Thorpe, lived right back of the old Ford garage, right back of Solid Barrel lived Baker. That White House. His grandfather had a saloon on the corner where the old Ford garage. And there was 4 other saloons, as I was told.
How big was Luther in those days?
I beg your pardon?
How big was Luther in those days?
Oh, that's only about 300 population, 250 or 300. But it was thickly settled in the rural, heavy settlement.
When did you move to Chandler?
We actually moved to Chandler. My folks did it in 1911. However, I had a brother that moved in Chandler area in 1905. And of course, we'd be back before. But my folks didn't move to Chandler until 1911. Well, when they moved to Chandler, I was away at school. why I had an uncle that was a bookkeeper for the Cunningham people in Sioux City, Iowa. And they sent for me to come up there and stay with him and go to school. So when school was out, and they were transferred, my uncle, from Sioux City to Chicago. So he didn't know what the setup was going to be. So they sent me home. Well, when I came home, my uncle living right out there to Chandler. So actually, home there.
How big was Chandler in those days?
Oh, about, I'd say 1800, something like that.
Tell me about, did you join the Army or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
When?
I was drafted in August of 1918.
Where'd you go for your basic training?
Camp Funston, Kansas.
Tell me about your basic.
Well, it was very good. Strenuous, however. Going into something that you didn't know too much about. But as I could look back through it, it had some good points, some bad points. And what I did, I just made up my mind. Well, now here I am. I'll make the best of it possible. That's the way I felt about it. And that's what I did.
How long did you stay at Camp Funston?
I was in Camp Funston 9 months. But that is due to the fact when the armistice was signed in November 11th, and the boys that was just chipped in drafted, they were immediately sent back home, except a few of us. Well, they kept me for the purpose of taking over what we call a discharging station. I was over there. For that reason, I didn't get a chance to come home until May. Yeah, for the purpose of discharging soldiers from other camps from overseas, and especially the 92nd and the 93rd Division, which was one of the most outstanding group of soldiers that they had. Him and the Rainbow Division, which was white. But the 92nd Division was big blue, and 93rd.
Did you ever go overseas?
No, I did not.
I'll be right back. Let me see what. No, but we were ready to go overseas. Emptied our bag of hay that was left home. Didn't have anything but our pack, gun, 45, and knife. However, when that had taken place, and we found out that we were going to have to leave there about 2 or 3 days, they were short, and the band was giving us a working on as to what we could do, how much school we had, and so forth and so on. And of course, I made it clear that yes, I played music, I did typing, and that's what I said. But for that reason, they said down to my company, and
they had to be transferred to my company, H, to the band. So I was with the band on the
Did you have black officers or white officers?
Part white, part of the time white, part of the time. Now, when we first went in, our officers were all white. And what happened, they had a training cadet down at Camp Pike, Arkansas. And some of the boys, very few, of the first draftees, which was in September, October 1970, they went down, and finally they made second move. And they came, sent them in, then they sent down in Fort Huachuca, that's in Arizona, and got a group of those officers out of the 24th and 25th Infantry and sent them up there to take over.
Did you ever hear about the big race riot in Houston?
Yes.
What caused that, do you know?
Well, actually, I never got the real, what you say real about it. It was a flare-up, a racial condition, that's what it was, which was happening quite constantly. But for the most part, we didn't have as much trouble along those lines as one would think, due to the fact of the feelings that existed between the two races. We were divided. They had Camp Funston, but we never had any run-in or anything.
What'd you do on Armistice Day, the day the war ended?
I wasn't aware of it until that night.
Then what happened?
It was about 2 o'clock that morning, because we were ready to board the train to go to Hoboken, New Jersey, to go overseas. Well, we didn't know why they were holding us like that until about 2 o'clock the next morning.
Then what happened?
Oh, well, we had a jubilee time. We sure did. Our band was playing, and oh, it was just cutting up something. And our superiors, they just let us have it, as long as it wasn't out of line.
Would you tell me about some of your more memorable events in your Army career that you remember?
Well, I could say this. I took down with influenza for a few days. And I'll always remember there's a white lady nearby, and I just rushed. I got an ambulance, rushed me to the base hospital over Fort Riley. There I lay for several hours unconscious. And I just knew I wouldn't be able to survive. And finally they brought me out. And I got along all right.
What medicines were they using to fight the flu?
The first thing they said they gave me, I didn't know it. The first thing that they gave was about 3 or 4 ounces of whiskey and lemon. That was the first thing. Baby was quinine in it. That's what the first thing is they would give you.
Then what would they give you?
Well, the juices and light foods, but they always used a lot of lemon. Where I was only in there about 4 days, and I told them, let me get out and go back to my lunch. And I was weak, but they finally let me out.
How many soldiers died of the flu?
I don't got the information as to how many died, but I do know this. I've seen them standing up beside the barracks, and all at once it just all over dead. And they had so many dead out there at the morgue that couldn't embalm them fast enough, so they had to just put them on ice. Now I see that with my own eyes because I had to carry the payroll over to Fort Riley for those that was in the hospital to sign the payroll. Now that's actually true.
What did you do after you left the Army?
I came back to Chandler. I was working for a lady that owned the Chandler Ice Company. And the last thing she said to me the day that I was leaving, she wished me good luck, and have a return, and if you return, you'll have a job. So when I returned, in Maine, that's when she needed one in Maine to start the ice wagon. So I drove the ice wagon, delivered ice all over town for a couple of years.
What size ice blocks? What size blocks of ice did you deliver?
300 pound blocks. Of course, we cut them into 25, 50, 75, 100. But the butchers would take 300 pound cans.
And what were you delivering the ice in? What did you have? What were you using to deliver the ice with?
Oh, wagon, hard team wagon.
On the farm, do you remember what brand of wagons you had?
Oh, no, I don't remember what brand they had. I didn't have a wagon. My folks did, but I don't know.
When you moved to Chandler, had the town pretty well rebuilt from the tornado when you moved here?
Well, yes, it was built fairly good. Yes,
Was there ever a strong KKK in Lincoln County?
that's true, yes.
You have any trouble with them?
Well, I had several letters from it.
What'd they say?
Well, they told me to be careful and watch my mouth, else for being tarred and feathered.
They ever stopped you in the streets or anything, or? And would you, in your own words, explain your feelings on the Jim Crow law?
Well, Jim Crow law, it wasn't all, the way I could look, see it and understand, it wasn't all bad. And especially back in those days, due to the fact that we've been used to just being with my people, you being with your people. So, looking at it from that point of view, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, only when it comes to this point. And I made this statement when I was in service. Our people wasn't qualified to hand down to us from an educational point of view, that the white man was able to hand down to his children. I, looking at it from that point of view, I thought it was very wrong. I thought it should have been kind of equalized, because it's a fact that in the event of a war, just like we entered World War I, we were denied machine gun battalion. No Negro, even the 92nd Division didn't have a machine gun battalion.
Why?
But they wouldn't let them have it. But what they did, they put that group of soldiers watching battle. Right behind this group of soldiers was the machine gun battalion. Behind them, backing them up. And behind the machine gun battalion, there was heavy and light artillery. Bombing ahead, in order that they could take in terms that they could run the enemy back, so the marchers on foot wouldn't have as much danger of being all slaughtered and killed. They did that. But we didn't have anyone working with a heavy and light artillery either, not a Negro.
Are there any effects of the Jim Crow law today?
Well, I would say yes, because that kind of a law, it'll take years and years and years for that to kind of go on. However, as I can see it today, it has gone a long ways from kind of giving away.
How has the attitude of the whites toward the blacks changed from your childhood to today?
Well, you speak it as a whole, because number one, the neighborhood where we live, usually, the white people and the black people around that area, well, got along just like we get along now. And we had several run-ins, the whites and the blacks. And of course, it's so happy. The white people in our area, they take up for us as quick as they would for anybody else. So living in such areas, it didn't bother me too much until we had moved down here in Lincoln County. And it was just pretty bad. Lincoln County, Chandler, Lincoln County, always have been on the other side, pretty much. However now, don't misunderstand me to say that they were not good people. Because there's always been a lot of good people in Chandler. And some, well, just all the Negroes in Chandler weren't good either. As far as that is concerned.
How did the Depression affect you and your family in the 1930s?
Well, it was pretty bad due to the fact that I lost my children's brother. I had 4 children. We had 4 children. Well, I lost their mother when, well, at 32. I was right in when the Depression was awful bad. And after putting her away, it was just my children and I. And I never separated from them, kept them together. I schooled them, some of them college degrees and things like that. But it wasn't easy. However, I've always had this one thing in mind: if anybody can get me to work or get something to do, I can. and I did.
What type of work were you doing in the?
Just first one thing at that time.
What did
Because
you-
I had to quit teaching school in 29 due to the fact of the ill health of my wife.
So you were teaching school.
Yes.
Where did you go for your teacher's training?
Training, for teachers training. For what school?
Mm-hmm.
And then no college, not whatever. Tell you what happened. When I came from Iowa to Chandler, it was a few days before school closed out here in the country. And I went over to the teacher, I didn't know her, I explained this to her that I was 8th grader, but I didn't bring my grades with me, and I didn't have time to send back for it. Would she let me take the examination? Of course, she wouldn't do it. Of course, I could see her side. So there I was. I didn't have an 8th grade certificate. I didn't have a high school diploma. I had no college. And yet, what I did, I was closely connected with some white people here in Chandler by the name of Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Gilstrap. Well, this Gilstrap husband was a Major Gilstrap.
That's Harry Gilstrap.
Well, so and working for them out in the yard, I said, well, this is, did you go to school we had a principal here by the name of Mrs. Sauter. Did you go to school with Mrs. Sauter? I said, no. Said, well, what?
Just a second. You ready to leave?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to leave because I have to make it now. But I just want to tell you that some information I was just thinking of that I might keep. Now, I know I can locate these people. But Ted Maxwell down there snared me because he's in very bad health. So I don't know how to help these. These are World War II veterans. His daddy was sheriff of Kentucky for a long time. He has a shotgun in line and flag. And he just has all kinds of wonderful stories about the sheriff department, plus the military. He loved the military. And then there's, like my mom, I get information about the loggers and sawmills and things like that.
What is your address here?
This is, we're box 20, PO Box 24,
And what's the zip code?
748.
74834. Okay. And what's your first name?
Jeannie,
Jean. J-E-A
M-N-I-N,
Vandenberg.
B-E-N-B-U-R-G. And also then, like my grandfather, now I have all this information, because I've been doing
Yeah.
genealogy on, like he was a county commissioner there for a long time and a farmer for years. And also had the first phone company there
Okay.
in the beginning, and there's a lot of hilarious
Well,
stories with him.
I'll drop you a line. I'll be in contact with you. And when is the building closed? Is it closed now?
No, this part stays open, and I don't know what time it stays open, but quite a while yet.
Well, I'll just have one more and we'll be through.
And, now, we close our cook leaves at 1:30 over there.
Is
That's
Mr.
just-
Allen still out there? Or is he go home?
He's still there.
Okay. We're just about through. You just
Be careful.
what's that?
Kind of wind bad, be careful.
Okay. You might tell him that we're just about through.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
I didn't
you.
want to interrupt, but
Oh, that's
I've got to
okay.
get to the bank.
So we're just. But I'll be in contact with you.
When I get down there, I'll check, and I have a lot of people that's working, that help work on that Republic County bill.
Okay.
That can help too.
Good. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
You talked about Mrs. Adams, and then you worked for the Gilstraps. And
Yes. Well, and working for them on the yard, but they particularly right, he was pretty nice guy, things of that kind. And I told him that I wanted to But my folks lived so far in the country, I couldn't walk to high school here. But I would like very much to get over this book, high school book. So they furnished me with books, give me lesson assignments. I had to bring them in every so often, but they'd go over, you know, examine, and on and on and on until, you know, it did pretty good. Well, but I take the notion that I'd go around different towns trying to get a good job, make enough money to go to Langston. Well, I never did, wasn't successful. And but I didn't give it up. I've always studied. And I could get help from different people. I wasn't ashamed to go to people that I knew that could help me. And on like that. So it took time here in the county that the county superintendent said to this Mrs. Gray, which Mrs. Gray was formerly a school teacher herself, said she's got to find somebody black fellow to go out and finish a term. Said the bad guy's teaching out there, his wife is a little sick, but she's teaching and he had to go and take over her school, and I'll have to send somebody out there to finish. That was an 8-week term. And Mrs. Gray said to her, well, you don't have to go to Klan. I know someone you get. And she said, told her who I was. Well, the county superintendent didn't know me. But she told her, said, well, now her brother was a doctor. Dr. J.W. Adams. But he was my family doctor. And she said, you call Doc. He knows him because Henry uses him as his family doctor. So she did. And Doc told us that, why, if anybody can tackle it, he can. So she said, well, you go and tell him to come up to my office in the morning. So he drove down to my house that night. We were sitting there playing a game of pitch. And knocked on the door, said, come in. I looked up and Dr. Adams. I said, well, what's up, Doc? He said, I want to talk to you. We walked down to his car, got in, and he explained it to me. He said, you think you'd want to accept it? I said, well, sure. So that's the way I got started. And when after this 8-week school was out, the people in that district and to the county superintendent wanted her to send me back. Well, she told her I can't send you back without a certificate. But she said, now wait. She said, if he wants to take the examination for a third grade certificate, if he can make it, I can send him back. If he can't, I can't send him back. So she challenged me with that. So I accepted that. I went on to take the examination. That's the way I got started. And when I wound up, of course, I wound up with the state certificate and 30 college hours. 30 college hours to show. I have a state certificate, I have a first grade certificate, second grade, and a third grade. I have all of my certificates.
And you did that all by yourself?
No, not alone.
Yeah.
By help. I had help.
But you did it on your own?
On my own, that's right.
Did you know Harry Gilstrap?
Oh, yes.
What kind of man was he?
Oh, to me, Harry was a gentleman. He was just a straight-out gentleman. However, due to the fact that his lady, he was firm or whatever he has to do to be very firm. But as a gentleman, he was and his wife she was a darling. And I think one of the boys are living. I think one of these boys are living. Claiborne, somebody, I think so. I think that's what Mrs. Farrell told me, one of them living. Yes, he was a fine man.
What did you do during World War II?
Beg your pardon?
What did you do during World War II?
I was janitor at Helmet Department Store when the war was declared. I stayed with them due to the fact I had a girl in college and a girl in high school, and until the girl finished college. And August the 15th in 43, I went over to work at the Tinker Air Base. I worked there 12 months, a little better, and I got on leave and went to Portland, Oregon, and I stayed Portland, Oregon up to 46.
What'd you do in Portland?
Worked at shipyard,
Shipyard?
painter.
No, what were your duties at Tinker? What'd you do there?
I was a packer. Made box pack, made crates, pack, fuselage, all different parts of that.
What was Tinker's main use during the war? What was being done at Tinker mainly?
So,
What was being done at Tinker during the war mainly? Was it an aircraft maintenance or what?
well, yes, for the most part, it was aircraft maintenance, and it was the headquarters. They shipped parts of the airplane all over, and all overseas, and like the plane was damaged, need tips, need this or that, the other. Well, they get them out of Tinker Air Base. We had to clean them and use a certain paper around them to protect the salt, flying them over the salty water. We had to protect them. So it was a busy place.
And what type of ships were they building in Portland?
They catered at this particular shipyard that I worked mostly to PCs, as Pacific Patrol, small ones. But they were very fast.
What shipyards were you working in?
Commercial iron.
Well, anything else about the early days you want to talk about? Well, Mr. James, I think we have a good interview. I've enjoyed this very much.
I've done my best. I did my best. Of course, it's always, I could talk from here tonight about various things in my life, but that isn't necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do need your autograph if I can get it. Oh, this is our release form that'll let us use the tape. This is the same thing that Mr. Woodard signed and your brother signed yesterday. I'm sorry.
No, I signed where?